Just a heads up, just like in the other parts, this one is in podcast style format. So if you are following the story thus far, throw this on a second monitor and relax. Let's get it. So where we left off on this story was where we got with Livia and spawn camped Lazarus, only to realize that Balthazar is basically heading to the desert to kill Kralkatorrik. So we don't really want to kill the dragons at this point because the world is becoming super unstable. But we're like, okay, we could at least go kill Balthazar. There's nothing wrong with killing gods. We just can't kill the dragons. So we head off to Alona and we meet up at Amnoon Oasis, which has changed a lot since Guild Wars 1. It was just like a rundown camp, and now it's basically like the only casino in the game. But when we get there, we're met with a bunch of problems, and these problems are caused by a new enemy called the Forged, which are much like the Full Metal Alchemist Exalted. They're literally magical suits of armor and machinery that are controlled by Balthazar. So they're basically his foot soldiers, and we are in essence trying to stop them from just running amok. Anyways, fairly early on, one of Balthazar's messenger boys comes and tells us that Balthazar will overlook us squashing his plans with Jormag and Primordus, which we just stopped, if we help him kill Kralkatorrik. Just for those of you not following, Jormag is the ice dragon, Primordus is the fire dragon, and Kralkatorrik is the crystal dragon, where Glint is a good crystal dragon. Kralkatorrik is a bad version of Glint anyway. Kralkatorrik is like the elder version. Like, I think Kralkatorrik is like Glint's dad, but he's already been messing things up in the desert for a while and even corrupted a bunch of the Char homelands. Kralki is a dragon that the Char were fighting primarily. Primordus, the Ajura, were fighting, and Jormag, the Norn, were fighting. Everybody's got a little bit of something. And then Sylvari were dragon minions of Mordramoth, and then the humans had Zaitan. But at this point, it's like 2 down, 4 to go, and we don't know about the water dragon yet, but we'll get there. Back to Balthazar. We're basically tell Balthazar's messenger, like, nah, homie, we're good. We're going to come after you. And we learn from the villagers how to ride on animals. And the main animals that we get are like big old bunnies, dinosaurs, sand wolves, and like giant stingrays, and they help us traverse this desert. So at this point, the locals of Amnoon are down to help us kill Balthazar, and they want to help us put him down. So they give us hints on where to go and where to look, and we go to the casino to investigate, and we're introduced to a character called Archon Ibiru. Now these guys are the primary force of Palawa Joko. And for those of you who remember, Palawa Joko was a dude who taught us how to traverse the desolation in Guild Wars by riding sandworms. And he has been busy since we've been gone. Joko is now basically the mafia in the desert, and he has a bunch of humans that follow him, and he basically acts as this chaotic force. But since we helped him out in Guild Wars 1 and he helped us fight Varesh, he's been pretty fruitful in conquering Alona this time around. Like he failed the first time, and then we helped him, and then he actually conquered it. The main story, Ibiru comes and strong arms the casino because you're only allowed to say praise Joko instead of anything else. And the Sun Spears, which now worship Cormyr, who we also helped become a god, she just bones out and does nothing for us. We're told that we can enlist help to defend Amnoon from the Forge. And so whatever we decide kind of shapes Amnoon. If you decide to use Joko's forces to defend it, everybody is kind of under totalitarian regime, and that's kind of booty. After doing that, we learn that there is another lesser dragon like Aurene. It's Aurene's brother named Blast. Blast is like the first son of Glint. And this dude got straight up played. He is out here like solo playing in the desert against Kralkatorrik. He's 1v1ing. And we learned that Balthazar is after him first. So we're like, okay, let's go hunt down Blast, and then we'll get to Balthazar. So you end up fighting your way through forged strongholds, trying to get to Blast. And you finally fight the Herald of Balthazar, which was the messenger that came in and told us to squash the beef. And after slapping some sense into her, you get this cutscene where Balthazar has Vlast all chained up, and he's legit in the story for like 5 seconds. But during this encounter, Balthazar calls Ritlock a friend, which we find very weird. And before the commander dies, Vlast breaks his chains to like save us. So like Balthazar has us pinned down and we're about to get murked. And then Vlast comes and like takes the hit for us. And he saves us, but he like dies instantly. And we wake up and we're like, hey man, Ritlock, why are you and Balthazar homies? Like, what happened? And it turns out that while Ritlock was on his ghost adventure, when he like followed his sword into the mists, he found some homeless looking dude like chained up down there. And he was all bummed because his sword was put out. Like his fire sword was all out of juice. And so the homeless dude was like, yo, I can relight that for you. You know, you hook me up, I'll hook you up type of deal. So Ritlock is like, sure. And he gets his sword relit, and then Ritlock frees him. So the dude the homeless guy ends up being Balthazar the whole time. So this whole thing is Ritlock's fault. Anyway, we end up meeting up with Balth and we're thinking, all right, it's time to put this guy down. But instead, he straight puts us down, like dead. Not like go back to the waypoint, but like dead. And straight sends us to the Shadow Realm. While we're in the underworld, we're with all these other dead people and we have amnesia and we're wondering what happened. And we meet up with Palawa Joko himself, and he's basically trying to get us to let him out. Like he's in this like little prison. So we hit him with that like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, like yo home, smell you later, and we dip out and regroup with our allies who are basically like devastated. They didn't realize that we were in fact the main character, and we hit them with that Jesus of Nazareth move where we literally revived ourselves on the spot after escaping the underworld. And we like nobody makes any sense of it. They're just kind of like, oh damn, you're back. And so we're like, okay, this time for real, we're gonna go stop Balthazar. So we end up dipping out to stop this giant war machine spider robot thing. And we do, and we fight Balthazar again. And this time it's basically like 2v1 because Kralkatorrik is there. I'm not sure if Balth was actually fighting Kralkatorrik or if we were fighting him, but Balthazar dies. Aurene sucks up some of the magic. Kralkatorrik sucks up some of the magic, and he just leaves. And we're like, yo, that's not good. But we go to Amnoon and we tell everybody what we did. And we're like, hey, we killed Balthazar. We do our little victory lap. And then Kralkatorrik flies over Amnoon and starts causing havoc basically immediately. It was like a real out of the frying pan into the fire type of moment. But not only that, Palawa Joko is also back from the underworld since he managed to get himself free. And he has beef with us because we just ditched him. So, I mean, rightfully so, right? So now we basically have two enemies that we need to contend with. First, we're prepping for another dragon siege. Second, we're prepping to fight like the undead lich mafia Don that is in control of the desert. So we decide Palawa Joko's got to go first. So we start down his path. Palawa Joko's main plan is to release what is called the Scarab Plague, which only affects humans, but it's like super COVID. So our band of heroes, fresh off the god slaying, go around and try to research and stop the Scarab Plague, while also trying to come up with ways to stop Kralkatorrik. In short, we end up trying to meet up with Joko, where we get arguably the coldest cutscene in the entire game, where we almost get KO'd again, but our main character plot armor ends up saving us, with Aurene busting in and literally eating Joko. And so after we took him down, we move into the next threat, move on to the next threat. But to do that, we need to figure out how to actually hurt a dragon, since Kralkatorrik is all crystal and we need a way to like penetrate his skin and armor. So we headed to the forge in the iconic Thunderhead Keep, where there was a forge that we can use dragon's blood to forge weapons to actually like damage Kralkatorrik. And during our planning process, Aurene is using her like fortune telling abilities to basically see alternative outcomes, like she's Doctor Strange. And in like 99% of them, she ends up dying. So the commander is like, nah, man, we ain't gonna do that. We'll figure something out. We got to come up with a strategy that doesn't involve Aurene dying. So we basically come up with a plan to blast Kralkatorrik and pin him in this like cathedral or mine shaft or something, and basically just jump him once he's in there. And a big part of this plan is to find Balthazar's sword, which was like lost in the mist after we killed him. So we're like trying to trace down his sword and use it to fight Kralkatorrik. And in this venture, the most tragic death of the Guild Wars 2 franchise happens. Our boy Blish, who was an Azura who transferred his soul into a golem, like in Full Metal Alchemist, ends up using his core, like his power core, to assist with the mission to finding Balthazar's sword. And he dies. And then our band of heroes like literally sheds a single tear for him before never mentioning him again, and then just like and never trying to return to recover him or anything. Back to Kralkatorrik, our plan basically works sort of because Aurene dies and then Kralkatorrik is still alive even after we damage him. And in a plot twist, since Aurene ate Palawa Joko, she got like Elder Lich magic from him and was able to revive after we pull all the crystal spikes out of her body. So Aurene's back, Kralkatorrik's all damaged, she's like running in the mists. So we end up chasing him down in the mist, flying on a dragon like we're in Aragon, and basically blasting Kralkatorrik. And finally we get him to open a portal back to Tyria after flying through all of these different realms, only to like blast him out of the sky where a bunch of these like fractured mist islands form around his body, where we end up like we're setting up to deliver the final blow. And just like Mordremoth, we go in and attack his mind as well as stage an assault against his body. But in short, we end up taking him down. This time we end up reliving a lot of our previous battles and relying on our allies and all that, which is kind of a theme that gets thrown around a lot since its introduction in Heart of Thorns. But we succeed, Kralkatorrik gets put down, Aurene gets a power boost, and the world is safe again. So to celebrate, we get an invite to the Char homeland because Char were fighting Kralkatorrik this whole time and they got really jacked up. So we end up meeting up with a dude named Bangar, who is like the current leader of the Char. And we go to experience the celebration and, take a load off. We also learn that Ritlock, our cat friend, has been like a deadbeat dad this whole time. And it turns out that Bangar is like a real Julius Caesar type of guy. And he set up a event where he had a few of his champions fight this like big branded crystal scorpion. And basically Aurene, who is like super juiced up now, straight nukes this scorpion from orbit, and the Char are like not exactly happy about that. And so time goes on and they convince Bram to get drunk, and they use that to steal Air's bow, which had been imbued to actually hurt Jormag. And the Char have this weapon, and they basically want to like go and convince Jormag to be like an Aurene for them, so that way like they're really threatened by the fact that the commander and the pact have this dragon, and they call it a weapon, and they say, hey, control your thing. The commander's like, Aurene's like her own person, she just does what she wants to do, type of deal. So they want to do that to Jormag, basically. And as you can imagine, this goes poorly for the most part. And in our attempts to follow them to prevent all of this, we learned that Bram was doing dumb stuff up in the north and basically like pissed everybody off. Like he had his own guild that he just abandoned and a bunch of stuff. And at this point, we're having our first experience with auditory hallucinations, which happens to actually be a bad guy. And so Jormag is the main threat, and as a villain, he basically ends up whispering all this stuff to us and promising them different things and basically just trying to deceive them. He essentially wants to quote unquote help the commander do stuff, but he ends up like attacking all the Norn spirits. He ends up having beef with Primordus, which is the fire dragon, and so on. We're like, yeah, nice try. Like, you know, you keep saying all this good stuff that I want to hear, but like your actions don't match. And like, I know you're up to something. Like, you're a bad guy. I know you're up to something. And so he ends up corrupting both Bangar and turning Bangar into his voice, which we end up like putting him in a cage next to our dragon, so he can basically just talk crap to us. And then he ends up turning Ritlock's kid into his champion, which at this point we are viewed as the champion of Aurene, but we're not corrupted or anything. Whereas the other dragons, their champions are like super corrupted. Most dragon champions are actual dragons. In this arc, they're like using humans or Char or other humanoid characters as their champions. But during this time, there's like a Char civil war going on, because Bangar's faction went to basically, they took like the Sons of Svanir route and went to go worship the Ice Dragon. And they're following Bangar and Ryland, and they're known as the Frost Legion. And then they're basically fighting everybody else who is a normal, sane, like, individual. But eventually Primordus starts waking up, and Bram decides that he's going to go become the champion of Primordus and then 1v1 against Ryland. And both dragons end up showing up, and we just kind of like facilitate, like, okay, like, we're going to have them just destroy each other. And we succeed. Ryland ends up dying. Bram ends up living. Not sure how that works, but that's what happens. And this time we're basically finally chilling. Like, we know that there's one dragon left, and all the regular dragons that we know about are taken care of. So after like a short break, our band of heroes gets hit up by an old friend named Anka. And Anka wants to talk to Gorik, who is like an old friend from college. Just like, you know, wants to catch up, wants to talk about dragon magic and all this stuff, right? So Anka ends up being a psychopath and is also an Aether Blade. And if you recall, Aether Blades were the Sky Pirates back in Scarlet's day. They were led by Mai Tren, who was Scarlet's right-hand man. And now Anka is Mai Tren's right hand. Anka meets up with Gorik, ends up kidnapping him. We go after them. The Aether Blades start fighting us. Aurene shows up, and then the Aether Blades blast Aurene with this like laser that turns her into like a sleepy, like sucks all the power out of her. And she can't help anybody anymore. So we learned that the Aether Blades, after Scarlet died, they just like went insane, because they retreated into the mists, and they ended up having to like kill themselves over and over at different instances to like get airship parts and to get stuff to repair and all that stuff. And it basically severely impacted their mental health. And in short, these guys don't really want to kill dragons, but they want to use like the dragon magic to reshape the world or something. And that's a problem because of the whole magical balance thing that we mentioned earlier. Like, it turns out that with all of the dragons dead, the balance is like super out of whack, and we don't want them to cause any more problems. We have one dragon left. We don't want to mess things up. We got Aurene. Aurene's doing her thing, and she's like gimped now. And so we like show up during this chase. We end up showing up in Cantha. And Cantha was like cordoned off from the rest of the world since the events of like 300 years ago. So we end up showing up, and Cantha is like the city of the future. It's all technological, it's all bureaucratic, and it turns out that all this tech is run by this dragon magic, and all the tech that is run by dragon magic is like being corrupted and like going haywire and stuff. And we don't know what it is just yet, but it's void magic. We end up meeting this inventor who takes us to this reactor that she had built. And in this reactor, that's where the last dragon is. And the last dragon's name is Suwon, and she's like a friendly dragon. But Suwon is being corrupted by this void magic. So she's going like, our time is short. I'm getting taken over by the void. And all of the tech that is running off of dragon magic is being taken over by the void. And so we got to figure something out. We got to take her to the vet, put her down, and then we got to help Aurene, who's like, we got to get Aurene back on her feet. And then we got to take down the last dragon. So Cantha as a whole was like largely as it was before, with all of the gangs. There's trash. There's like an entire junkyard full of trash now, which is like, it's glad they kept it true to the Cantha of yesteryear. We're basically trying to cleanse the void magic so that way the world does not go into the void or something like that. But so we do that. We kill the last dragon. We stop the void. Anyway, after this world-ending calamity is avoided, we get a notice that like crazy stuff is happening in this mine, like this jade mine, where people are going nuts after like digging too far down. And yeah, so it ends up being demons. So as soon as the void is done, we're now being haunted by demons. The demons that are haunting the mine shafts are now our number one enemy. So we got to do what we do best. We go there, we do exorcisms, and by that I mean we just kill the demons. So we do that, and this plot thread gets completely abandoned because all of a sudden the wizard's tower has vanished off of the coast of Kryta. So we go there to investigate, and there's this like band of wizards or some secret order of wizards. We're like trying to figure out what's going on, and then we get sucked into this like creepy realm, and we're being chased by this big old demon. And at this point, our hero's all beat up and weak, and we can't do anything to this demon. So we just try to evade him and basically like get away. And then we finally get sucked out of the demon realm by Zoja and some strangers. And Zoja was one of like the OG heroes that was with Ridlock and Logan and all of them. And when we arrive, they're basically being attacked by like swarms of demons coming out of these portals. And we have to seal up the rifts and stop the demon invasion, which we do. And we learn that these demons are basically trying to invade the world through possession. Like they possess people and force them to do demon stuff. And then we have to basically beat them up and get the demons out of their mind. Sometimes we're able to cleanse the demons. Sometimes it just results in the death of whoever the host was. But we end up meeting this person named Isgaren, who is like the king of the wizards. And Isgaren is a seer, which we thought were long gone by now. But we end up meeting another person named Mabon, who is a Mersat, and we're also pretty shook by this because we just went on an adventure with Olivia to kill the last of the Mersat. So we find out that the wizards are basically the society of like overseers who just kind of observe stuff happening, and they take on the big mystical problems of the world. And we're kind of like, yo, why didn't you help us with like, we just had the void, like this world-ending threat, and didn't do nothing. They're like, oh yeah, we had bigger fish to fry. And we're like, okay. But they use magic that is like unique to them, and they're able to conjure fractals, and that's kind of what they did. They made a bunch of fractals from our various adventures, like what if scenarios. So if Balthazar won, what would that look like? If Kalkatork won, what would that look like? And so on. And at this point, the Wizard's Tower is sealed off because Isgaren is missing. So we work with Mabon, the Mersat guy, to like unseal it and get a key to the Wizard's Tower. There are other characters that we haven't seen in ages, like dwarves, which were supposedly altered in stone back in the day, and so on. Just a lot of these like one-off characters, and we learn about the lore of their people a little bit more. And So we unseal the Wizard's Tower and we find out that Isgaren is being possessed. So we end up beating him up and freeing him from possession to learn that Mabon also gets possessed, but we end up killing him because like we couldn't exorcise him. Like when we try to exorcise him, he just dies, but Isgaren got to live. So the entire time that we are doing stuff, we're getting like whispered to by a mysterious person. And we don't know if this person is like a friend or a foe. And the last time we had strange whispers, it was when Jormag was talking to us. And we know how that turned out. So we eventually meet up with this person named Patha, who is the sister of the demon that was chasing us around in the demon realm. And she basically wants to stage a coup against the king of demons to free her people. And it turns out that the demons invading Tyria are just kind of misunderstood beings who are oppressed by this ruler, and Patha wants to just bring the demon society into like the modern world. So we help her fight against the demon king guy and kill him, and the whole story arc is just us doing the same thing that we did with every adventure, except it's in the demon realm now. So we establish a foothold, we kill some key members, we get some generals on our side, and then we go after the big bad and we kill him. After that, we get a notice of strange occurrences happening in northern Tyria, where all the bears live, which are the Coden people. And there are reports of Titans attacking stuff there. So we go to check it out, and that's where we're at currently. And Titans were beings from the first one. I covered them back in the Guild Wars 1 story, but Titans were basically beings that came out of the Gate of Kamali, and they're kind of like, I don't think they're demons, but they're just these like monster destroyer monster things that are coming out. But they're happening up north in northern Tyria, so we go to check things out. And that brings us up to present day. There are also some side adventures that happened during the Balthazar God-slaying arc, where we find a pathway into the underworld, where we help one of the first followers of the God of Death to kill basically the Grim Reaper. And also we go and squash some beef between two Jinn who are basically just using us for their bidding. But those stories are kind of standalone, and they don't really tie into the greater story flow like the way the other Raid Wing stories did. But if you're looking for a good standalone story, the Hall of Chains is a great story. And with that ends the entire Guild Wars 2 story up to this point. And we'll see what continues to happen in Janthier, and I'll cover that once it's fully released. But thanks for watching. A big thanks to all my subscribers, and a special thanks to all my members who support this channel. I'm working on a full Lies of P playthrough with members only live streams, and once that is complete, I'll be doing some public videos covering the game. But that's all I got for now. So thanks again, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.